Okay, new vehicle in the workshop. So this is a Renault Kangoo. So firstly, thank you to Malcolm for sending me this one. So as you can see, this is a 69 plate, so late 2019, early 2020. So not an old vehicle. It's not done mega miles. Should we just have a look? And then we'll talk about what's up with it. There you go, 32,000. Not a lot at all. And it's got a rumble from the front end. It's not very loud. I tried to capture it so that I could kind of demonstrate it, but it's really not very loud, so that was tricky. Yeah, so the guy that owns it, he obviously fixes swimming pools. Yeah, he said it was dead quiet when he got it, and it's developed a rumble, not very loud. But sometimes also when you're slowing down, what you'd be like kind of overrun as the car's kind of regenning the van. It's kind of a bit louder at that point, a kind of real, I don't know, louder rumble. I drove it quite a bit, and I did hear that once, but I was kind of thinking, well, this is not very loud. And then I just had to move it around outside, and I thought I can hear it. And he described it as when you're in a road that's got like walls or houses close to the side, you can hear the rumble. And he was dead right, basically. If you're moving it, even not mega quickly, but just around, and there's things either side, buildings either side, you can hear it. And it's a low rumble. It sounds like motor bearings. It really sounds like motor bearings. So we will see. You have to get it apart. It's either going to be motor bearings or it's going to be reduction gearbox. Most likely is motor bearings. But the most interesting thing is to see sort of which bearings failed and whether it's just a standard bearing failure, whether it definitely is bearing failure, because these have a separate onboard charger. Now that's interesting because it's believed that the bearing failure is caused by discharge, so electrical discharge, so where there's a power, so like a voltage difference between the sort of rotor and the case, and then that voltage discharge is sort of going through the bearings to leak out, so it's kind of like arcing, so sparking the bearings as they spin, or indeed possibly when it charges, because on a Zoe when it charges, because they use the motor windings for as an inductor basically for charging. And that's how they do 22 kilowatt or indeed 43 kilowatt charging. Now, the interesting thing is that this has a separate onboard charger because it doesn't do it that way. It'd be really interesting to see what the design differences are on this vehicle, bearing in mind that it doesn't use the rectifier. There's a little inductor that then connects onto the motor for charging on a Zoe. It probably won't have one of those. It'd be interesting to see if the motor is exactly the same, because it looks the same. It looks the same on the technical information, but there's actually an extra wire on a Zoe motor that is just there purely for charging. So it's a three-phase motor, and it's a star configuration, so they all go, three phases go into a central point. Obviously they're sort of wound around the motor, but just like your tube map version, your logical view is that you've got a center point, then all the three phases are all connected to that center point. So on a Zoe it's got a center tap that's then connected out, and that is purely for charging purposes, basically for single phase charging. But will this have that? Is it literally just a Zoe motor, or is it a modified motor? It does have a slightly different part number, different sort of variant, but Renault seem to do that. Like the Zoes have like 5 different variants of motor, but don't tell anyone, but they're all the same. But yeah, interesting. So we shall see if it's all the same, if it's a Zoe motor, and we just crack on, and if it obviously is indeed the motor bearing. So yeah, I mean, good job of the owner to basically realise that it's making this noise, because if you let it go, it causes more major issues basically, and then you can't rebuild the motor. So yeah, good job on the owner. This is going to be really interesting. I've not done one of these before, having a little bit of difficulty getting the technical information, but hopefully we're going to resolve that before too long, and that'll just help us with any sort of tricky bits. And yeah, I'm going to start getting this stripped down, and I'll catch you in a bit, see how we get on. Cheers. Okay, so I've had a bit of a start on the strip down. So obviously bumpers off, headlights are off, and sort of like weird kind of design choices they make with this. One of the really odd things is you go to unclip the headlight connectors, so there's 2 connectors at the top, and then you think, oh right, okay, we've got them off, and then you try and move the headlight and it's still connected. And these are the actual connectors that go onto the bulbs, and you actually physically have to open the back of the headlight and disconnect these because it doesn't come off any further up. Really odd design choice. Anyway, the front bumper removal was slightly odd as well, because with the Zoe, there's some bolts along the top, bolts along the bottom, one on the corner there, and then there's two like Torx bolts connected to the arch liner. Yeah, the bottom of the arch liner, and then you sort of pop it off. But with these, I've kind of been working this out. It's a little bit weird, but there's these fixings down here, so you have to kind of like pull the top of the bumper, get right down there with your longest attachment, and undo those, and then it pops off. Slightly odd design choice. I was kind of thinking this would be a little bit easier because it's more spaced out, but yeah, so far it's a little bit of a faff, but yeah, we're getting there. So this grill's loose, it's got the charge point connected onto it, so I'm probably going to unbolt the charge point from the stack and then sort of disconnect that and bring that off with it. But yeah, I'll keep stripping this down and see how we go. Yeah, alright, cheers. Okay, so a couple more bits off. I was hoping this would be easier due to the space, easier than a Zoe. But so far it's not really, it's certainly just different. One of the big differences is this air conditioning valve block normally sits kind of like down here out the way, and then you just unbolt a couple of pipes off the radiator pack. But with this Kangoo, it's actually part of this radiator pack. So I'm just kind of working out the piping really. I don't think we could sort of disconnect this from the radiator, but then it's kind of going to be hanging around in the way when we need to take this stack out. So probably just work out which pipes we need to take off really. So this pipe obviously just loops around onto the radiator, so presuming we're taking this off with it. This one, yeah. So where does that go? That goes backwards down there. So we need to disconnect that one, if you can see it, that one from the back. Then we need to disconnect this one, and I'm hoping that will do it then. Oh, there's another one there that comes down here. Where does that go? It goes up there. Ah, that's okay. So this fill point goes down there, if you can see that, and then that's there, which is that one there. And that's hooked on. So I think that can come with it. Hopefully we can wiggle that out. Yeah, I'm trying to get a bit more technical information on these, just in terms of procedures and stuff. It's proving a little bit tricky at the moment, but hopefully that should come through shortly. But yeah, it's quite interesting. Another difference is, so with the Zoe, when you take off the slam panel, this cable, so that's the release from inside on the passenger side. Normally you'd pop this off and then it just unhooks from here. But obviously it's kind of like captive in there. So it's like, okay, maybe we just leave that. Maybe we leave that on there and move that to one side. It's all those kinds of things that we're working out. But yeah, it's quite good fun. It's like when there's something that's normally really familiar and then suddenly it's all different. But yeah, good fun. I can see what I need to get to anyway. This all looks very familiar, other than this onboard charger. The rest of it is, yeah, it's very familiar. Yeah, I'm hoping also that coolant bottle is going to wiggle out under that slam panel, come out with the radiator. But yeah, it'd be nice to get that radiator pack out shortly. Okay, good fun. I'm going to carry on. All right, cheers. So, interesting development. I now have the full Renault Powertrain removal instructions, which is cool. So this is the kind of thing you get. So you get your picture and you get your disconnect the 3 EVC computer connectors, and then they're sort of like highlighted by being a bit darker, and then remove the EVC computer. So if you look at these two bottles, I'll go up a little bit because I've actually taken it off already. So that one with a strap and then the smaller brake fluid reservoir. And then if we go over here, so you can see there, so the 12-volt battery was there, so you take that off first and then you take that, flip that down, take the EVC off. So this is cool. So now I can just follow this basically. So the next thing is take off the mounting bolts from the air conditioning compressor pipes and the 3 bolts from the Powertrain air conditioning pipe retaining brackets. Sometimes you have to work out kind of like what it's actually referring to, but yeah, this is cool. This is what I really wanted. So that is cool. So I'm going to take those off next. I'm going to follow the instructions, which is a bit of a novelty. One of the things that occurred to me, so this vehicle is produced in sort of diesel and electric, and there's a heat shield on the back of the engine bay. I'm presuming that's mainly there for when there's an engine in here, because it's not going to produce a lot of heat, this, but yeah, amusing anyway. Alright, I'm going to follow my instructions and I'll catch you in a bit. Alright. Okay, so obviously progressing, now I've got the instructions, that makes things a lot easier, although to be fair, with the original manufacturer instructions, sometimes it's a lot like they tell you how to take everything apart, whereas that's not necessarily what you really want to do, or not the quickest way to do it. You don't always have to separate everything from everything to get it out, if that makes sense. So they want us to remove the air conditioning compressor. Normally I'll just take that out with the stack on the Zoe, that kind of thing. One of the interesting things to note, so this wiring loom kind of wiggles along and then connects to the washer bottle and to this all these air conditioning sort of solenoids, valves. So if we go back to this end of it, I was just trying to move it out of the way, and there's this tiny little earth wire. So it's on the negative battery terminal, and then it's actually taped onto all the positive ones, and then it goes onto this loom. And I'm kind of thinking, oh, you know, somebody's modified this. It's quite common on these vans to have extra things. So this one's got flashing lights on it. Sometimes they have like refrigeration units, all that kind of stuff. So I think every Kangoo I've looked at has got extra stuff connected to the battery. So that's quite common. This stuff is obviously aftermarket though. But this one, so this tiny little wire, because I want to move this loom out of the way, and I'm just obviously concerned about damaging this, connects into this loom, and it disappears into this one, which then it gets incorporated into here. And if we follow this down, let's just move this over there. So we follow this along, it's on this one, it's on this one, and it goes onto this 6-pin connector. Okay, that 6-pin connector, so I was kind of wondering whether there was something aftermarket fitted here. That 6-pin connector fits onto that siren. So I was kind of like, okay, that's a bit weird, because it looks aftermarket. It's done with standard electrical tape, which is kind of starting to peel off, rather than the proper tape. So you get this like cloth tape, which is what they normally use for wiring looms. It's like kind of this stuff. They normally wrap the wires, or you can just see inside here, if I move the camera, that cloth tape is what they normally use. Electrical tape kind of looks like it's aftermarket, mainly because the cloth tape is more expensive, so you can usually tell people have used electrical tapes, that's what we've got hanging around. But this seems to fit onto a Renault component. And I was thinking, this is a bit weird, but something triggered a memory in the back of my mind. I think I've read something about how you can have optional security, sort of an extra security system fitted on these vans. And I wonder whether it's then not part of the original wiring loom and kind of either in the factory or at some point they kind of tag this on. I mean, this is a really weird way to do it, with a really tiny wire which doesn't have any protection. I guess there's a bit of extra in there. But yeah, kind of... yeah, a bit of Renault factory special. So I need to move this loom out the way, and I don't want to damage this extremely small wire, so I'm probably going to undo this tape, undo it from there, and then I can just sort of like, yeah, maybe take the wire onto this loom, and then I'll just refit it afterwards. But yeah, just an interesting little quirk, so I'm going to do that. And okay, so now we're getting somewhere. So we're nearly at the point where we're going to take this stack out. So there's always a bit of a decision with these, whether you take the wiring loom that's on the stack out with the stack. Okay, so the loom around the stack disconnects from various points, so it's connected into this sort of fuse box, so you can literally take the lid off and like turn it upside down and take all the connectors out. And similarly with this one, you can take these power feeds out, and then you can remove this stack with this loom on. So in this case, I'm going to need to disassemble this stack anyway, so I would need to unbolt all the wiring from the stack. So, and it's kind of a little bit, you know, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other kind of thing. So probably what I'm going to do in this instance is undo it from the stack and just move it to the side. Which I've done sometimes with Zoes. I did that on a Zoe that had CCS, because it's got so many more wires, so that made that slightly easier. Yeah, basically just just sort of kind of start stripping it down in situ. I've also got the brake vacuum pump here as well, and ideally we'll leave that in situ as well, but just need to check how that's kind of bolted on. You're kind of just disturbing the minimum really, because it's sort of unnecessary. It's the first one I've done, so you kind of just yeah, taking your time, tread carefully, and yeah, just making sure that you definitely know how it goes back together. Although obviously we've got the instructions, but yeah, just working it out. So a little bit more to take off. So there's an AC pipe here. So on a Zoe, that AC pipe would actually go on the back of the front subframe, be bolted down like that. So you would take that off before you take off the subframe. But on this one, yeah, it's just loops round and onto there. So these don't have a heat pump. So this is actually the bottle for the heater loop, I do believe, and so not the coolant. There's another coolant bottle that fits here, and these have, so it's got AC, but it doesn't have battery cooling, I believe. So yeah, these are a little bit different to the Zoe. It still takes a lot of AC gas though. That's something I want to check, because it's still about 1,000 grams of gas, which is what a Zoe takes, but I don't think it has battery cooling. But I need to double check, because there's a lot. The other thing I could do is follow the pipes as well, because there's quite a few valves and things for just a straight AC system. If there was no heat pump and no battery cooling, there seems to be a lot of valves. But I'm always impressed by the size of these pipes. Actually, massive. No wonder it needs 1,000 grams of gas. The other thing I noticed is underneath, if we can get a good shot of this, where are we going to go? Hold on 1 moment. Yeah, 1 moment, please. As Big Clive would say. Just under here. So on my previous video, I made up the loom extension for doing the Zoe, running a Zoe off another battery, and I had to do like a double extension. And then looked under here and look at the sides of this cable. That's what I needed for my previous video, to hook the Zoe up to the other Zoe, because that could have gone straight through. So I thought that was slightly ironic. Obviously, can't steal the one from this van, but yeah, but that project's done anyway, so that was fine anyway. But yeah, so I'm going to crack on with this. So yeah, unbolt all of these, obviously earths and things like that off. There's the gear cable selector. Interestingly, on the Zoe, it's always on this side. So yeah, I guess that's why there's one either side for different sort of vehicle configurations. So yeah, that needs popping off, and earth off there as well. Drive shafts are out, so we've got no drive shafts, and yeah, get it disconnected. So we're going to need to also disconnect this cable, because that is the end of that long one that we just looked at from the battery. And then this tray bolts on the top, and it's also bolted down here as well. So yeah, I'm going to start stripping this down, and then yeah, then we can get it out. All right, cheers. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So we're just preparing to get the stack out. It's got the engine crane on. I've got the brake vacuum pump, so it's still on its bracket, but it's sort of disconnected basically, and obviously all the pipes are covered up because we don't want any dust or moisture or anything in there. So that's the bracket that from the battery, the cable from the battery that comes onto that main connector. I needed something to just keep those out of the way for a minute, and I'm using my yardstick. This is not a meter rule, just to clarify. That is an actual yardstick. Yeah, so it's all looking good. I'm just undoing, so we've got one engine mounting over here, and then there's the 3 bolts on that one over there. There's a tie bar at the back, just like on the Zoes, just to sort of stop it from moving, which I've taken off, hence this swings like that. And yeah, I'm going to get this out. This is quite cool. So what I may actually do, because this is first time I've had the stack out on a Kangoo, is take that end cover panel off just to have a look inside really, and see the differences to a Zoe, because I'm just interested to do so basically. But yeah, I need to strip all this down, take off the reduction gearbox, take off all of this control box, that's the onboard charger, AC compressor, and then so we've just got the motor sitting on the floor, and yeah, and then see what it sounds like, just to sort of finally confirm the bearings. One thing that's fascinating is this, and look at the state of this. This is, yeah, the original wiring. Oh dear, it's not pretty, is it? So this is the this unit is the onboard charger, square one. This is just a bracket, and the AC comes in here, and then the DC comes out this side basically. So this is the DC feed. I haven't actually worked out where this ends up, and I need to double check that there's definitely nothing still attached. As far as I can see, there was nothing, but I was kind of expecting that to end up maybe in that connector. But yeah, a little bit different that. And look at the state of it. I mean, yeah, nice one, Renault. Yeah, so it's not a properly made cable like sort of this one. That's how they're kind of meant to be. This is obviously, yeah, just something they've knocked up. So yes, nice, very good. So yeah, I just need to finally work that out, and then we'll be able to get the stack out. So yeah, I will catch you in a bit. Cheers. Okay, so that is out, which is cool. So we can see the brake vacuum pump there. So it's just kind of easier to leave that in place rather than undo these bolts and have to support it. And it's in front of, you can just see the bolt there as a plane goes over. Yeah, you can see that that's in front of its bracket. So that seemed an easiest way to do it. Yeah, so just looking at the back at the instructions again, it does say to keep that loom on the stack, but then the next thing you do is just take it all off basically. So with a Zoe you can kind of do it either way. And this is obviously very similar. The only difference with this one really is that you with a Zoe, if you take out the wiring with it, you would bring the main, this is the main connected to the battery, and also the comms connected to the battery, because the battery connects sort of just down there underneath the footwells. So you would disconnect it off the battery and then pull it through. Whereas on this you can't do that part either way. With this you have to leave the high voltage battery connector there because it goes all the way to the back basically, because it's right at the back. Another interesting technical detail which I've just noticed, so I said that there was AC valves and things, but I didn't think these had heat pumps because they have a wet heater loop. So there's actually a heat exchanger in here, so you can see, because it did give away, is you've got an AC pipe there and you've got a coolant pipe there. So, and then behind it, I don't know if you can see, kind of tricky to see, but if I point it out there, this component here is a water pump to run the heater loop. So what's going on here? So we've got this extra water bottle, we've got T-pipes here, we've got it going into the cab. So if I just move that, you've got your 2 pipes there in and out of the cabin. So what's going on? Well, we've got a heat exchanger to the AC system and all of that. So we need to think this is a van that they produce a fossil version and an electric version. So the interior has a wet heater matrix. So it has these pipes going in and out. Okay. So that's how, obviously on the fossil version, you get engine coolant running into the cab. So that's absolutely fine. Now they're going to make an electric version. So what we're going to do, you could just put an electric heater, like a kettle effectively, which some have, and early Kangoos had. They actually had it hanging under the 12-volt battery, and it just had a, coolant, or maybe we should call it something else other than coolant, because it's actually getting hot. That's the idea. Yeah, just to heat the water and then pump it into the cab with a little water pump. That's one way to do it, but that's quite wasteful really, because it's just burning electricity basically there, 4 or 5 kilowatts. Yeah, and it just makes everything hot, and it's really quite wasteful. So what it looks like these have, but I need to check with the technical information, is I reckon these have a kind of hybrid heat pump where they've got the valves and they can flip the system round like you can with a Zoe. So you can make the front radiator cold, and then you can make in a Zoe, it's got 2 air conditioning radiators inside, one effectively part of the hot part system, high pressure, and then one cold part of the system, low pressure one as well. So with this, obviously it only has a standard AC radiator inside, and what it has instead for heating is it's got the wet loop, but I reckon that it's effectively that is the hot radiator, so that the air conditioning system is heating the water, which is kind of interesting. It explains why they take a lot of gas, similar to a Zoe, but they don't have a heat pump. The main interesting thing is Zoes are known for having quite poor heaters, and with this one, it's actually got to heat the water, but a lot of that heat is going to end up in that reservoir, and it's obviously going to be in these pipes, which have then got to get inside. And this is one of the issues with having indirect heat, basically powered by electricity. So where you have the basic system like the old Kangoo has, where you've got literally like a little kettle, and then you literally heat the water and pump it into the cab, the kettle box gets warm, it's losing heat, all these pipes are losing heat. Imagine if it's like 0 degrees and you're putting, to get some decent heat inside, you need to get these to a reasonable temperature, sort of maybe 50 or 60 degrees or something like that. You're just losing so much heat here. So that's why they tend to be quite wasteful. So some cars have moved to having high voltage electric heaters inside the car, So Teslas do that, the Nissan Leaf, the later ones do that as well. So you've got an electric high voltage heater inside. So they could have done that with this, but that would have involved a lot of, obviously, more work inside, whereas this way they're keeping it inside, totally similar. The car is expecting warm water, but yeah, the warm water, it looks like it's actually coming from a heat pump on these, which is quite cool. But, you know, with the Zoe, it's got weak heating. Well, that weak heating is actually coming out of one of these pipes, which has then got to travel through. You've got the heat transfer, so that whole, I don't know if that's an insulated box, but you can see this end of it's just metal, so that's not insulated. So you're losing heat there. You're losing heat all the way run up these pipes, and you're losing heat to all of this water. Obviously, the water's got to keep circulating to move the heat, but you're losing heat all the time. So your water might, let's say it leaves there at 60 degrees. By the time it gets to there, what temperature is it? I don't know, 50 degrees? And then it goes inside, you blow some sort of 0 degree air through it, but it's not going to then end up at 0 degrees. It might then end up at 20 degrees. Well, it's coming back out here. It's losing more heat on the way back into the heat exchanger. So I suspect this system is still pretty inefficient, but I guess they would think it's an improvement. To use the AC system to provide the heat, an improvement above having that old kettle box literally sat under here that's just kind of like boiling the water and sending it in. So yeah, quite interesting. Explains why it takes a lot of gas. Yeah, kind of hybrid heat pump. Fascinating. Interestingly, the previous Zoe I worked on, I did the onboard charger on, didn't have AC. So how did that make heat? So maybe that's got the old system on it. Must have some way of making heat. So that's the downside of having these improvements. You can have a heat pump, but not all Kangoos have AC. So what do you do if you haven't got AC? You have to develop two systems. So whether it's actually worth it, whether it would have been easier just putting the basic heater loop with a heater and just get it close as possible. So these pipe runs are really short. You can insulate them as well. Whereas, yeah, they've made this kind of complicated for themselves, because it looks like when the vehicle's got AC, then it actually has the heat pump system. I don't know whether there's 3 variants, so it could be the case that you can have AC but not have this heat pump edition. You can have AC and the basic heater. Interesting, fun and games. So yeah, very interesting quirk. So right, I'm going to start stripping this stack down, and then see what the motor sounds like. So that is the main aim of the game. But hopefully that is a little interesting aside, and I will start stripping this down. Yeah, all right. Cheers. Okay, so we've got the air conditioning compressor off, onboard charger off, the tray that holds the onboard charger off, and we've solved the mystery of where that cable goes. So this Mickey Mouse looking cable goes underneath the tray that holds the onboard charger, so that actually connects the cooling pipe. So it's got, I don't know why they did it like this, but it's got cooling terminals on the front, and then the coolant actually moves up into the onboard charger, which is just, I've just popped on the shelf. This is upside down, so it's got those cooling, sort of the channels in there. It seems like a bit of an odd configuration to me, but yeah, that's where that connector is. So I was just concerned if it was disappearing down the back, I didn't want to be pulling it, because you really don't want to be yanking any of these connectors, basically. But yeah, that is custom to the Kangoo. There's a very similar smart model, which has a configuration like this as well, with a separate onboard charger. But yeah, that will be unique to sort of this model and that model, and doesn't appear on a Zoe, basically. So it's got like a cut down control box. I've got a Zoe control box here. One moment. Yeah, so this is a Zoe control box, slightly grubby on that end, but you can see it's got this charging filter hanging off the side, and then we've got these 3 connectors here. And so you can see here we've got these 3 connectors, but there's no charging filter hanging there. So yeah, from the front you can see this sort of up and round configuration, and that's where the charging socket connects to. See 3-phase charging on the Zoe, so you've got a bigger connector, whereas on here you've just got that apart, basically. Yeah, so that's that difference. So I'm going to strip this down, so I need to get underneath and disconnect the motor wires, and yeah, see what's going on. What I'm going to do first actually is get the reduction gearbox off, and then spin the motor and see what it sounds like. Alright, cool, catch you in a mo. Okay, so we've got reduction gearbox off, so we can give this a spin. So let's give this a try. Yeah, I suspect you can hear that now, and that's just spinning by hand, not having to spin it, you know, sometimes a wrapper strap around it, so I can spin it really fast. But yeah, I'm amazed at how noisy that is, given that the van really wasn't that noisy. I drove it quite a bit to try and hear the noise, just to try and confirm the diagnosis. And it really wasn't very loud. I wonder whether, just to sort of make up of the vehicle, this is a lot bigger vehicle, it's more kind of insulated on the bulkhead, and whether that means that you just don't hear it as much as on a Zoe. But yeah, interesting. So yeah, customers done a really good job though of noticing that there's an issue. They've had it for a while. They said it used to be dead silent and now it's not. There's definitely something wrong with it, and they sort of don't want it back until it's fixed, kind of thing, which is absolutely spot on. So yeah, because if these go too far, you get overheating, you get damage in the motor and all that kind of stuff. But so the most interesting thing is the suspected cause of bearing failure on these motors is electrical discharge through the bearing, which pits the actual balls, the actual ball bearings, and then you kind of get uneven wear, and then they run into those pits, and then that's obviously, why it's rumbling as it's going around. Now this car has a separate onboard charger that sits here. So the Zoe uses its motor windings for boost conversion, like an inductor, if you know what one of those is, to increase the voltage, basically. So that it's got a charging rectifier, but that kind of like does a like half-wave rectification effectively, and then and then the motor kind of boosts it, and then the rest of the rectification is actually done in the motor controller and then back into the battery. So we know that we've got bearing failure on a car which doesn't use the motor for charging, because this has a separate onboard charger. So that kind of leads us to believe then that actually the bearing failure, may well be due to electrical discharge, but potentially not while it's charging. Or at least we know that while it's driving is a significant factor, because otherwise this car wouldn't have got it. So yeah, interesting. So yeah, I'm going to strip this control box off. Got to get to that cover panel, take the wires off, and get that off. And then have a little assessment of this motor, make sure we can rebuild this, and then go from there. Yeah, all right. Catch you in a bit. Okay, so control box is off, and look, it's a little baby one. It's a lot easier to move around, I can tell you that. Wow. So it just doesn't have that charging filter obviously hanging out there, because it's got the separate onboard charger. Interestingly, so I was saying it doesn't use the motor windings, and I'm not actually sure. I need to look inside that control box to fully confirm, because it has a separate onboard charger, which obviously has that output connector, which goes onto there, and that one obviously just doesn't exist. Is on that box. There's a big charging filter on the way, so it goes into there, and it's a 2-pin connector. And I was expecting the motor to not have this end connector. So this is a 3-phase motor, and if you know about RC cars or any kind of 3-phase motor, you expect 3 wires, okay? And then the phases are kind of wired between them effectively, and that's how you power your 3 phases. So what's this? So it's a star configuration, and that's the middle effectively of the 3 phases. So that's like the neutral kind of thing of the motor. And it normally uses that for the charging for the boost conversion. So I was expecting that not to be there on a Kangoo motor, but it is there. Is it used, and do they just produce the same motor for a Zoe and a Kangoo, and then they just don't use that because they don't need it? I don't know. So what I need to do, or what I want to do, I don't really need to, but I just want to find out whether that neutral is actually connected to anything, and whether that connector literally is just straight onto the DC bus to end up in the battery, or whether that connector is actually still feeding back through the motor. So they use the motor, but it just has a 7 kilowatt onboard charger. So I don't know why they would bother doing that, really. I mean, I don't know why they bothered with this anyway. You've got a Powertrain that does 22 kilowatt charging, and then you've chopped it down and made a worse one. I think it's maybe because there's no battery cooling. I think that's probably what it all comes down to. But yeah, interesting. Anyway, so I'm going to take the top off that control box, take the side off, and see what's inside. I will catch you in a mo. Okay, so mystery solved, and I was right all along. So where you can see, you can't see it through there because I've moved it, so you can see, you can see it there. See that terminal? It's literally not connected to anything. So that is the neutral middle of the motor, the star configuration, and it's literally just, there's a place for it to bolt onto, and it's not used. So I think they've done that so they can literally use the same motor in a Zoe and in a Kangoo, and then they just don't do anything with the neutral, which makes perfect sense, basically. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Some interesting changes in here. So on a Zoe, I'm just going to move that control box around so we can compare. One moment, please. Okay, we can carry on the demonstration. So the other giveaway is the fact that there's nothing here. So this is from a Zoe, and this is an inductor. And then you can see, yeah, the output from the inductor goes down there and is what is connected to that end pin on the motor. Whereas this one, obviously, there's nothing there. So that is unused, we know. So again, on the Zoe, we've got a rectifier here. Obviously, the Kangoo's got its own onboard charger. You don't need a charging rectifier. So it's just got like a control box here, and it's got loads of fresh air under here. So I can put my hand under there, nothing there. And just to fully solve the mystery, so that connector that they've added that doesn't exist on the Zoe, so that backs into here. And if you follow the wires up, you can just about, hopefully, maybe see, if I just put my torch down here, you may, if it focuses, you can just see a couple of metal tabs in there. Drop the torch. Spectacular. Right, hold on. Okay, we're back. I'll put my torch in where my hand was, and you can see those two pins there. Okay, so that is where the onboard charger output connects to. So now, I've focused on that, now it's just going to not really focus very well. Now we know that the output from the onboard charger literally just connects to the positive and negative, and then ends up inside the battery, basically. So we know for definite it doesn't use the motor for charging. So we know that this Kangoo, the motor bearings have failed, and it's nothing to do with charging, because we know that that central pin, which on the Zoe is connected to this inductor via this wire, which, let me just put my head torch back on so we can get a bit more light in there. So yeah, we can see that, not that one. We can see that one there, so that's actually the bolt. That is actually the bolt where the motor wires come in that slot and connect onto. We know on this one is completely unused. So yeah, because we can see the top of it there, and that's where the brassy bit. So yeah, that's quite cool, really. So inside here, we've got some buzz bars. This is all the interlocks, so all of the little orange connector sensing wires. A little bit of wiring here as well to connect different things. This is a DC-DC converter, so exactly the same on the Zoe. It's got that there. We've got, this is a DC capacitor, and that's sitting on top of the motor controller. And on the Zoe, so I've got the DC capacitor, and that's sitting on top of the motor controller. And the motor controller's there as well, and that's a sort of very similar configuration. So yeah, just a cut down version, really. The main difference is that rectifier is not there, and the inductor is not there as well, basically. So yeah, quite cool. It's got that neutral tab that is over to the side somewhere. Yeah, it's still under there. It's down there. You probably just about not see it. That's the black one under the silvery one. Yeah, that's still there, but it's got a silvery one on there. So yeah, just a little earth there. So yeah, quite cool, really. I like that. This is an interesting configuration as well. On the first Zoes, they're like this, so they just have foam in between, and then the case is up against here. Later, they added a bit of foam on the outside, and actually bought one of these that had been in an accident. And this had actually impacted the case. It kind of like shaken everything, and there was a scorch mark. This bar had actually touched the case. So in later Zoes, they've added, so that foamy bit, there's another foamy bit on top of here. And on this one, they've even seen fit to put some foam and bolt it down as well. I guess they thought, oh, I've got an unused terminal there, and they've bolted it down. So yeah, quite interesting. Presumably standard model of DC-DC converter. 678R sounds familiar. That one is a different one, but I think this is an early. So yeah, it probably is the later generation that matches the Zoe. But yeah, interesting stuff. So yeah, we need to get this motor stripped down next. So that was fun. I can put that case back on now because we know how that works. Take some pictures, and yeah, crack on with stripping down this motor. Yeah, all right, cool. Catch you in a bit. Okay, just so yeah, just preparing to do the bearings. So having a look at the inside the brush box, this all looks pretty normal in there, really. There's actually a little score. I think I need to turn it around this way. Hold on, caller. Yes, you can just see there's a little score just in that ring, just about there, if you can't see it. So I don't know why that's happened. There was nothing evident on the brushes, but Not a major concern, I don't think, because the wide pad fits in all that darker area. Obviously this all needs cleaning up, but yeah, there's not like a big lip on here or anything, so that all looks fine. No sort of concerning sort of things over that side. The only really interesting thing so far is on this ring. So I'm just taking this apart, so this ring slides in here, so this is the rotor position sensor, and then as that turns it sort of detects this change in distance from this ring. It's just the yeah, the notable thing is the surface corrosion on here. They do suffer from it a little bit, hence I replace these when I do the bearings, but that's really bad. A lot worse than I would expect for the sort of age and mileage of the vehicle. I mean, it's a 69 plate van. I mean, that's getting quite dark there, isn't it? On that patch, that's not surface rust, that's kind of going beyond that, really. Yeah, so that's kind of surprising. Yeah, there's a bit on here, but yeah, we can clean all that up, not a big issue. A little bit in here you always get, but we can clean that up, that's not really an issue. But yeah, that's quite surprising, really. But yeah, that'll get replaced anyway. So we've got the brush kit, we've got the bearings, and we've got the that ring as well, and then we clean up the rotor position sensor. But yeah, the main thing is to get this rotor out and get the bearings off. So I'm going to crack on. Cheers. Okay, so it's all apart. It is just like doing a Zoe motor. Well, I'm convinced it just is a Zoe motor, basically. I haven't done one of these for a while, but yeah, I think you never forget, really. It came apart quite easily, actually, really, to be fair. Not too much pressure needed to get the rotor out. So caps off, rotors out. So just having a look at where the bearings are seated, you can see here normal sort of aluminium case and steel on the outside of the bearing. And yeah, it's probably a bit of electrical discharge, sort of scoring that. So yeah, that surface, it's okay, it needs cleaning up. This one, I mean, yes, really doesn't look that good at all, given the age sort of the van. Yeah, I wonder whether these vans are more prone to this because they have smaller batteries and maybe don't sort of get driven as much on long journeys. But yeah, with the slower charging as well. But yeah, all this needs cleaning up. So the bearing sits here, and there's a circlip that goes there. But yeah, this all just needs completely cleaning up. You have to be really careful just over here, because this is where the seal from the gearbox sits, and then this bit is sort of in oil of the reduction gearbox. But yeah, well, that needs cleaning up, so that's all good. But yeah, motor looks all right, really. There's nothing, you can go inside if you like. Whee, there you go. Nothing of concern, really. Yeah, all sort of normal, basically. But yeah, just having a good look. All needs cleaning up. So round there, if that's going to focus, maybe you can see in there spots of rust. If it's going to focus, maybe not. I can manually focus, but then we'll be stuck on that focus forever. Right, if I hold it still for a second, that would probably help. Get some more light in there. There you go. So you can see those spots of rust. So all that needs cleaning up. You can see that's just marked that as I've pushed that out, but that's fine. So just real light sanding just to get that off. And all this needs, all these mating surfaces all need cleaning up as well. But yeah, good progress. This is really good. See, now we can't focus. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to pop some new bearings on here. This all needs cleaning up first. So clean up, get some new bearings on, and put it back together. Yeah, it's all good. All right, cool. And yeah, then put it back in there as well. Cheers. Okay, so the motor is back together. So this is the bearing out the back. That one is noisy. It doesn't really come out on the camera because you can't really spin it that fast in your hands. One at the front wasn't noisy, but obviously they get replaced as a pair anyway. And obviously you could hear the noise before. So let's give this a spin. And that's how it's meant to be. Literally no noise whatsoever. I've had a good inspect of this motor, nothing too concerning. A little bit of surface rust as you get, but yeah, this has all been cleaned up. You have to clean up all these mating surfaces. This had a little bit of rust on it as well, so you're just cleaning everything up. And so I'm going to crack on with putting this motor back together. So on this front end, this is the ring that goes in the middle of the rotor position sensor that goes on here. And this is our rotor position sensor. Yeah, so a little bit of surface rust on the outside. That's not really a concern because that's not kind of like a functional part, but I'll clean that up anyway. What we need to clean up is kind of like in here, really. So yeah, we just need to make sure it's not too bad. There's a little bit in there. Yeah, so we'll that needs a clean up. Yeah, and then that will be all good. That end's putting back together. This end we've got the brush kit. So always put a new brush kit on. The main reason is because these are really inaccessible. So this fits onto here. I've just got some tape on it to protect that. So that goes on there, cover on, and then the control box is there. whether it's a Zoe or a Kangoo, it's totally covered up. So it's got to be like this to be able to change that. So obviously it'd be silly not to do that right now. So I'm going to put that back together and then start rebuilding the stack. So we know that that is good. Customer's done a spot on job there of actually hearing the difference in the noise. Some customers, by the time it gets to me, the motor's in a bit of a state because the noise has got really bad or it's physically broken down. Whereas this customer was like, no, there's definitely something wrong with it. There's definitely something wrong with it. And then they were absolutely spot on. They obviously know their van and they want to keep it working. They don't want the issue to get too serious. So that's really good. And I'm going to keep rebuilding this and I will catch you in a bit. Cheers. Okay, now we're going in the right direction. So motor bearings are obviously all done, brush kit's done, rotor position sensors all cleaned and put back together, everything's cleaned up and starting to put it back together. Putting the control box on, obviously because this is a Kangoo, the control box doesn't have that bit that I showed you earlier there, so it doesn't bolt straight down onto those. It normally bolts, you're seeing it about there, it normally bolts down onto one of those. But instead, it's got this tray for the onboard charger. And I do find this bit really fascinating. Firstly, just because of how some of it looks. I mean, this just looks terrible. It obviously is functional, but it looks kind of aftermarket. One of the interesting things is, so they've made this tray with a couple of coolant plugs, and then that just feeds up into these channels, which then feed into the onboard charger. I'm kind of thinking, why didn't you just put a couple of plugs on the front of the onboard charger? Seems a bit weird, but fair enough. I mean, to be fair, you do need a sort of structural plate because you've got to hold this unit. If I move my hand, it will focus. You've got to kind of anchor it onto it because the engine mounting is there, and then there's like a dog bone at the back to hold it on. Oh, that one over there, it's more kind of a flat plate on the Kangoo rather than a dog bone on the Zoe. But yeah, you've got one there to sort of stop it from rocking. So you've got a lot of force through here. So you've got to kind of hold these bits together. There's a couple of bolts down here, that and same on the other side. But yeah, so you've got to have something chunky on the top. So okay, chunky bit of aluminium is going to hold those together. But I'm just fascinated by the way this is made, really. So they kind of made it hard work for themselves with the cooling. And if we turn it over, so these things are obviously made with a piece of aluminium that they cast, and then they kind of like mill it and machine it, and then these are like steel plugs that they press into it. So if we turn this over, so this is the cable that I was originally trying to work out where it went, and then it goes into the plug around there that the Zoe doesn't have, custom to the Kangoo. But yeah, just really fascinated by this cable they've obviously made for the Kangoo to fit under this tray. So they've cast this piece, then they've sort of milled it and machined it. So like you've got to machine this flat, and then you grind out the holes so you can put your screws in, you tap these. And then they've obviously got like some sharp bits here. So then they've had to do that. That has blatantly been done by hand, hasn't it? It's not been flat milled. So the sort of manufacturing processes are just going on and on with this. Whereas in a Zoe, that is all part of that. I mean, you kind of wonder why they couldn't have kept like the tray, because where the charging filter is on the Zoe there, part of it, if you take it off, it's just like a flat tray. And you kind of think, why didn't they just make that, the size that fits in the tray or on top of the tray with like an adapter? But instead they've kind of designed a whole new thing. But then it involves so much manufacturing. It seems very convoluted to me. But yeah, that cable in particular, the fact that it's covered in electrical tape, that seems like an afterthought, just to sort of protect it on the bend. It's obviously like this underneath, this kind of shielded, sheathed cable. The other interesting thing is the onboard charger plugs into here, so it's just tapping into the HV bus. So it's just positive and negative, kind of what we looked at earlier. So on here, that's the AC compressor power supply. That's the main battery power for the whole drivetrain. Basically, that just connects literally to the battery. And this is an optional connector for a heater, which in places like Norway or particular cold markets, you can have an extra high voltage heater. I think it's cabin heater, certainly sort of windscreen area. So just because it's so cold, the interior heater is not sufficient, basically. So the interesting thing is that this plug, I would think you can there okay, then you can't have a Kangoo with an extreme cold market heater, but I don't know if they do that. But yeah, there is one there. Every vehicle I've ever looked at, that's empty. Some markets might use it, I guess. and they don't know necessarily which configuration, so maybe they would shoot themselves in the foot. But yeah, they kind of, changed this casting. They've put in a connector, they've put in the cabling inside the buzz bars. When there's a connector there, it's like, yeah, it seems really interesting, just the way they've gone about this. I guess the engineers don't know exactly how these things are going to be marketed, so they can't shoot themselves in the foot, or then they're going to get in trouble. So they kind of have to make every option available. But certainly the design of this just seems really convoluted. I think they were probably held by the restriction of it having to be structural, because you've got your engine mount there and your engine mount there, and it kind of, it's hanging there. The motor is sort of hanging between those two. So this is a reasonably heavy unit, and it's obviously not one lump like an engine. It's got multiple components. But yeah, really interesting. So on a Zoe, the tray comes off, it bolts into, I think, that lower one, and then there's a bracket that the air conditioning compressor sits on. This doesn't have the bracket. The bracket is basically like this part. If you just chop this bit off, so if I chopped it down here and just got this flat plate off, it's like that. So you've got the charge filter there, and then the flat plate sits on the side, has a little return like that, because then it bolts into those two. So it kind of like bolts down and anchors it, and then the air conditioning compressor just fits on the side of it. So that sort of anchors it together. So yeah, I think they were held by that restriction. But yeah, really interesting. The main thing that's fascinating is, well, how Mickey Mouse some of this looks, but also the how it's been made. So we can kind of see how many processes there are to make this element that they have custom designed just for the Kangoo, fully electric. It does seem rather convoluted. I'm also really concerned about the sealing. Obviously, I'm putting this back together. I've done onboard charger changes before, so not had issues. But yeah, just thinking about the sealing of these, obviously I'm worried about dust and particles being on here, so I've actually just taken it outside and just cleaned it just with like a degreaser, like an alcohol based one that just evaporates, so no, it's not going to cause any contamination. But yeah, just cleaning, wiping it down, make sure that seals. And the onboard charger, you can see there's a bolt at the front there, and then there's two at the back, two high ones. So the low one, that one, because that's upside down, fits on here, and then the two at the back, those ones. So it kind of like bolts down, but then you're relying on that rubber seal to sort of push it down. Yeah, really interesting, really interesting. One of the benefits with these, you can get away with stuff like this on an EV because it just doesn't get very hot. Like a petrol diesel car, hot summer's day, sitting on the motorway, sitting in a queue, whatever, it's going to get to well over 100 degrees and the fan's going to be running, that kind of thing. There's going to be a lot of cooling needed, but an EV sitting in traffic is going to generate very little heat because it's all related to the amount of work it's doing, and at that point it's not doing any. And even hammering down the motorway or whatever, I mean, these cars have a 33 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's good for 100ish miles, maybe 120 if you drive carefully, but if you drive carefully, you're generating less heat, so you've just not got the heat. It's just cooling the electronics anyway. It's not even cooling the motor. So yeah, I hope that's interesting. I'm quite fascinated by that. This is quite interesting, but I do really need to get this back together, so I better get on with it. All right, I'll get this stack back together and start putting it in there. Cheers. So I thought I'd just give you a quick view of it being back together before it goes in. So I don't have to put the wiring loom around it because I left that in there. So we debated before about taking it out or whatever. And we left that there, so that was fine because we'd have to take it off here anyway to get to the motor. So it's pretty much back together. And I thought a good point just to, show you it back together. So we've got that tray on, we've got the onboard charger on, we've got the compressor on. So there's, so that's the sort of compressor bracket that I was talking about. So that's all hanging there, that's all bolted up. And just a little note really about if you're going to do a major project, because how do you go from the point of doing a few odd little things on cars and get to the point where you can do something like this if this is what you want to get involved in? Well, much like anything, how do you do a massive project? You just do it one step at a time. You don't really do something like this as your first project. I talk to garages who have done their EV like safety training, and they say to me, I've got a Zoe and it doesn't charge. And I'm like, well, have you done much electric stuff before? No, but what do we need to do? Have you got the parts? I'm like, well, yeah, but it needs diagnosing. There's sort of like 10 steps and you're trying to do 3 of them. And a Zoe is not, or a Kangoo, anything, these kind of real complex ones are not the easiest ones to start with. These are the big jobs. Start with smaller things, build it up. How do you eat a dinosaur? You eat it one bite at a time, And how did they build the Eiffel Tower? You know, I'm pretty sure they started at the bottom with, you know, the first bit. And obviously, presumably had a plan as well. But yeah, you know, obviously the information, having the procedures and stuff is really helpful. Some people do like major engine rebuilds, and so something like this, which, you know, it wouldn't matter to them. It's nuts and bolts kind of thing. Obviously, if you've got the knowledge of which components failed. But one other thing is, I was always really concerned about knowing exactly which bolts go back where. And Renault are really bad for like having, you know, 3 bolts or 4 bolts, and some of them being slightly longer than others. And this is actually the mounting for the fan that sits on the top. And these ones are longer than these ones. So you can see that's a long one, and that's a long one, that's a short one, and that's a short one. And if you take them all off and throw them in a bucket, it's not going to go back together correctly, okay? And then you're going to put a long bolt into something short. I mean, here it's not going to be a massive issue because there's nothing underneath. But, you know, if you're putting it into sort of somewhere that's going inside the case, you know, you're potentially going to be obviously pressing down onto something, damaging something that you don't want to. So I always, if at all possible, try and put the bolts back in. So you can see here I've taken 4 bolts out to take the fan is on those 2, the motor cooling fan. Can't remember what those 2 are, but it doesn't really matter, because when I find the component that fits here, that's the bolt. There's no debate. And much like this bracket is different to a Zoe, so I'm not really familiar with where this bracket goes. Okay, I can look at the instructions, but I know it goes kind of on the top in the middle, because that black bit there is the rear. There's like a just like a kind of rubber bung that just fits into there, or like a plastic bung. It's got 2 bolts at the front, and then just like the point fits in there. So this goes, I can kind of like see that it goes here, because there's the bolt. There's a bolt. Where are we? It's really hard to look through the thing. Yeah, so there's one there, there's one there, and there's one there and one there. And there's no debate about which bolts I'm trying to use, because the bolts are there. Okay, does it take slightly longer? Well, yes, of course it does. But well, actually, does it? Because I'm not debating which bolts go where, because they're there. So this is an earth point, and that's the bolt. And that's a 13mm bolt. And this is a clamp where the charging... It's like the charging cable or something sits on here. And they're all, those 3 are 13mm bolts. But I know that one goes there and those go there. No, those go there because they are there. So I think it's quicker because I'm not taking the bolts out of a bucket and thinking, oh, which one was it? And then getting them the wrong way around, potentially damaging something. I'm not doing as good a job. I was also at a garage once helping them out with a car. And they had a BMW i3. So i3s, can be fully electric, or they can have a range extender engine. Quite an interesting architecture, particularly on the charging on those. It's a bit weird. If you think the Zoe is weird, and that's kind of, well, probably not as weird as a Zoe, but it is a bit weird, differently weird. But yeah. So the car can have an engine and a motor and battery. Basically, it's a little bit similar to an Ampera in that it drives fully electric, and then it's like a petrol generator. It's a little motorbike, like scooter engine. So an interesting vehicle, but one garage had attempted to work on it, and basically they just couldn't do it. But they'd taken the engine out and done all sorts to it. So the vehicle arrived. The engine arrived on a pallet, a bit like that, but it was the scooter engine. And then there was a pink flexi bucket. So like this is my spare Renault bolts bucket. So when I take a pack apart, like I showed you that Renault one, I throw them all in here. And then if I get a damaged bolt, rusty bolt or anything, or a clip's missing or anything, I can just go in there and find it. So there was a flexi bucket like that. And I kid you not, it was about 2/3 full of bolts. Okay. So were they really intending to put that back together, or was it just a show for the customer? You know, is that how they normally work? They just throw the bolts in a bucket and then try and work out what to do later. And then what do you do when you've got a hole and you need a bolt for it? You just pick one at random? You know, if you're undoing that many bolts, there's going to be a lot of different ones. Renault, as I say, are really bad for adjacent bolts being different sizes. Maybe the engineers would say that's the perfect size bolt though. So, you know, let's just give them that one for a minute. But yeah, that's just not, I'm just never going to do them like that. You know, this is how I work. I work for myself, so I can do it how I like. And yeah, we do it the best as we can. The clock is not the most overriding factor. And if you're figuring these jobs out, it doesn't matter if you're in a garage or not, it's got to be similar. You can't just watch the clock. If the boss is saying, oh, how long is this going to take, you tell them, Do you want it to come back? Do you want the warranty claim? Do you want it to be done properly? You know, that would actually drive me mad. I know people who've left garages because they've had to try, sort of work under pressure, and they've not been able to do the job properly, effectively. So yeah, so I'm going to put this back on. I know exactly where it goes now because I can see that those bolts all match up, and I know where the bolts are. So I'm going to pop this back in, yeah, and crack on. Cheers. Okay, so we've got that back in. Started putting the wiring loom back over there. Just working out where everything goes back. Some's the same as the Zoe, some's a little bit different, but yeah, quite similar. Another sort of slightly vague quirk is this bracket. A very odd design. So it looks like it's sort of connected in here, but it's just like a round flat bit, and it's just sitting against a machined flat edge. Very strange. A bit like this edge, really. It's just kind of leaning on it, and then it's got a couple of bolts up the top. Seems a bit odd, but you know, it's all good. So yeah, just getting everything back together. So yeah, wiring loom back on here, water pump in. That's the vent pipe from the reduction gearbox. And yeah, been down the back, and there's all the various brackets and wires and things that need reconnecting. So just kind of working my way around it, putting it back together. And obviously I can check it against the instructions because that's really good. So yeah, I'm just going to crack on, get this back together. We've got the ECU back in. It's in 12-volt battery next, and really the aim of this part of the job is just to get enough back in so we can fire it up, get the motor to spin, and just make sure that everything is definitely quiet and working, all that kind of stuff. Give it a good high-speed spin, because if there's any issues with the alignment at all, that will all come out basically. But it should spin without any vibration, without any noise, and that's what we're looking for basically, just to make sure that the bearing replacement was good. So I'm going to crack on, and yeah, catch you in a bit. Okay, so I'm pretty sure we've got enough on to power this up and just check that we've got no major faults, basically, that we haven't caused any issues, and then the motor spins, and just make sure it kind of sounds okay. Really, it will sound a bit notchy because there's no oil in the reduction gearbox, but yeah, just to get it to spin. So yeah, putting all that area back together was sort of fun and games. Normally you have this cable tray on a Zoe, so then you've got a bolt here and a bolt at the back, but you've got this kind of added complexity with the brake vacuum booster there. But yeah, that's all sort of back together. And the other area that's really tricky actually is this area with the wiring. I started taking this apart before I decided to leave the wiring loom on the car, because the instructions say to take it apart, and then trying to get this back together was quite complex, and mainly because there's 3 bolts here, but one of them doesn't have a nut on it, so you're kind of like, what's going on, and the routing of this cable. But yeah, fortunately the instructions came up trumps, so you can kind of see we've got the 3 bolts here. One shows that, so center one has that kind of cable holder, and then it's showing that cable moving behind. Yeah, so that just makes it dead easy, because you're like, okay, that one's it's not meant to have a nut on it. It's meant to have this kind of cable retainer that's kind of slightly tricky to see. There we go, pushed onto it. Yeah, and then you know that cable routes behind, so that made it really easy. The other thing is just take lots of pictures as well. Sometimes I look back at the videos I've taken. Obviously, as I'm showing you the stages, sometimes I look back just to check where things are routed. With this Kangoo, the other thing is that it seems quite like kind of intertwining stuff. So yeah, like where we've got an additional pipe here, because we've got these ports on a Zoe, you would just have top and bottom ports and it sort of cools everything. We've got these additional ports, and then we've got this pipe, but it's sort of behind here, and it's all quite sort of intertwined. I remember when I was taking this apart, the kind of how things wiggle between each other is is sort of going to be the challenging bit when it comes to the rebuild. But yeah, we've got the gear cable on, we've got our earth on, so I'm pretty happy. I think we should fire this up and just see what's occurring. Right, so I've got the key. We have to get in. Keys in my pocket. Yep. Right. Well, it's alive. No faults shown so far. They seem to like beeping, I think. Right. So let's firstly just check it still starts. I never quite care with these whether you have to. There we go. Whether you have to put your foot on the brake, not on the brake, because I've not got quite so much experience with these. But right, it's fired up, which is really good. I'm just going to swap hands momentarily. Right, so let's put it into drive. There we go. So we've got no drive shaft, so we have to be careful going back to park. But we've got the pedestrian warning on. Let's turn that off. Right. Yeah, cool. Sounds all right to me. Right, I'm just going to go back into neutral. We can go and have a listen. So that's just free spinning now because it's got no drive shafts. Yeah. So a little bit notchy, but that's fine. But yeah, it's just that kind of whine. There's not a rumble. So we've got rid of that rumble. So yeah, we're happy with that. And obviously, yeah, everything works. Things must be aligned. It was spinning quite fast there, actually. With a Zoe, the traction control cuts in and you can't actually spin them that fast. So that's actually quite useful. It's a little bit easier with these. The traction control doesn't sort of just cut in. And yeah, you can really give them a spin. So I'm just going to leave that. I know it's not in park, but obviously that was still rotating. I think it's stopped now. I'll pop that back into park in a minute. But yeah, that is cool. So I'm happy with that. And yeah, just a case of carrying on with the rebuild now. So yeah, obviously the true test is when you get it on the road. There's no load on it. But, you know, we will give it a good road test and see how it goes. All right, cool. Okay, so sort of home straight really. So radiator packs on, slam panels on, crash bars on. This is such an odd looking design here with a horn. So they sort of, I don't know why they put it there. So on a Zoe, it's like over here. It's kind of hanging off this side of the crash panel. Yeah, it hangs off the slam panel, but it's just there. But they've kept the pedestrian sounder in the same place as a Zoe. But yeah, this horn is actually bolted onto the crash panel, and then it hooks into there, and then the wiring kind of loops around into there. That's why the gap there is there. But yeah, really kind of odd. So that sort of shield is there because the air goes into here, and then that kind of like ducts the air in basically, so the air can go to all of the radiator but through this slot. So on this you're going to lose a little bit of sort of cooling efficiency because the air can go up there and then it can just come out of there again. It's really slightly odd. Seems like a little bit of an afterthought. Another interesting thing, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, maybe if I stand back, but that radiator panel, radiator pack is actually slightly twisted like that. It sits forward. It's probably apparent, so here, where we've got the mounting point here, you can see that kind of like sort of lines up with that, sort of with this line, doesn't it? Let's say, that pin. Yeah, or maybe just on this front edge. But over here, it's obviously like it's back here. So yeah, it's sort of pushed forward at that side. It's sort of off centre. It's obviously off centre to one side, but then it's sort of angled out as well. Really odd, okay. But anyway, yes, we march forward. So yeah, just kind of making sure that everything's back in the right place. Lots of, obviously you need to be back in the right place, but in terms of the sort of cables and pipes and things wiggling around each other, quite complicated kind of in this area. So you've got things going in and around each other. We've also got the charge port wiring to go through there as well. But yeah, lots of things intertwined on this. So, you know, making sure this is in the correct place, which it is. That's literally where it's meant to be. Yeah, so just just fully making sure that we're doing it all correctly. Obviously referring to the instructions because we've got those, which is fantastic. And interestingly, I've just booked in a Nissan Townstar, which is actually a rebadged Kangoo. So it's literally a Kangoo underneath. It's made by Renault, but Nissan just didn't have a van of that size. So badged the Kangoo as the Townstar. But it's a 2023, which is interesting. Accident damage, which they're now having trouble getting it to run, basically. And getting the kind of, the sort of electrical side working. So that's coming to me, which is quite cool. So it's really good actually, because I've worked on the earlier ones of these. So now we got this one, which is sort of 69, so the kind of the facelifted, upgraded, improved one. And then the Townstar, the sort of Kangoo E-Tech, as Renault would call it, that's sort of, I think it's about 2022 to 2025 they did that. Bigger battery, facelifted, but under the bonnet, it's just literally, it's got this same stack. All very similar, actually. It's more got the Zoe type because it hasn't got this onboard charger. It's got the charging filter like the other one we were looking at. So and the faster charging and all that. So they've sort of, you know how I was kind of saying that they've worked hard with this Kangoo to build a drivetrain, which is worse because it only charges at 7 kilowatts. So then the new E-Tech charges at 22, like a Zoe has always done. So they used that worse drivetrain temporarily. Interestingly, with the E-Tech one, so this one that I'm getting in, the Townstar, it has battery cooling. So there we go. The battery's a little bit bigger as well, which is quite cool. But yeah, so anyway, future videos on the upgraded version of this. But yeah, quite cool. So yeah, I'm basically need to do drive shafts. That's one of the big next things. Gear oil, coolant, obviously headlights and under trays, arch liner, stuff like that. And then finally the bumper. And what I haven't mentioned is that wiring snake. That is definitely going to be in the next job. So that has to wiggle down on a Zoe. I know inherently where this goes, but I'm going to refer to the instructions just to make sure I don't put it on and then take it off. But yeah, it all makes sense usually when you present it. So one of the things, for example, I couldn't work out exactly where these clipped on. They were just kind of down here, and I was looking around and thinking, what's going on? Obviously, when you undo it, you just pop them off. But when it comes to putting it back together, obviously you've got to be 100% sure where it goes. It's actually really useful doing these videos because I can just flip back a few videos, and then obviously I've got staged, take it apart with the video moving around. So yeah, but yeah, you just kind of like got to work it out really. There's a little clip there which needs to clip onto something, so we need to work that out. But yeah, it's all good. Usually you can see where, oh look, it's scratched there. I was just literally going to say you can see where it's scratched. So now we know that clips on there. So that's literally what I'm doing, just going through the whole vehicle, doing exactly that, just working out where everything goes, because we want to do a decent job, get everything absolutely back. You see some vehicles that have been worked on and kind of the major things are back, but then clips like that are undone, things are, it's just not been done well kind of thing. But yeah, that's not the way I do it. So right, I'm going to get these final bits back together and we'll go from there. All right. Well, now we are getting somewhere. There's a little bit of light rain on the gazebo, but hopefully that's not coming through too much. So putting the bumper back on was always going to be fun because of these really inaccessible bolts. So this trim piece around the charge point obviously goes here, and then there's 3 like torque screws. One's there, and one is down. Can you even see it? Look. If I get the camera and the torch and the I don't think it's going to focus. But anyway, you can just about see it down there. If I do that, maybe. No, it still won't focus. Anyway, it's down there, which is really inaccessible. So I got it off by using my long bar, my little Torx thing. And that's fine, because it comes up with it, because it's magnetic. Great. But trying to get it back in there, it's not very strong magnetic. And trying to get it in the right position was just like a nightmare, basically. So I kind of worked out how to wiggle this piece off. And yeah, there's just one bolt, basically. If you open the charge port, if you're working on one of these, a bolt there, and then basically if you kind of look underneath it, you can see all the tabs and you can kind of ping them off basically and get that off. So that makes it a million times easier. Next thing is still quite difficult to get it down there and turn it. The access is still quite poor, but yeah, in the end I just used like a little bit of electrical tape and literally had the Torx socket and then the little screw thing, and just put a little bit of tape on it basically just to hold it in there. And then once you obviously tighten it up, then you can pull the thing out, because yeah, it's a little bit magnetic, but it wasn't kind of strong enough. When you touch it on something, it kind of like falls off. So yeah, it's all a little bit fun and games working on a completely different vehicle really. So yeah, I am getting there, just been talking everything up. One interesting thing is the suspension. What's going on with this torch? There we go. The suspension is a lot beefier than a Zoe. When I looked at it, I thought, ooh, yeah, interesting. Even like, so these panels are a lot thicker than they are on a Zoe. Similar setup with the front subframe and that piece, and then the aircon pipes through are very similar, but yeah, this is all just a lot beefier. This is a lot thicker. These bolts are a lot thicker. It looks like it's got the same drive shafts, but then just sort of like beefier brakes and things. But it's not a massively heavier vehicle, although it can actually tow these. These do have a tow rating. So yeah, maybe just a higher sort of gross train weight. But yeah, interesting stuff. And the torque, I should say, setting on those bolts is massive. It's like 180 Newton meters. We're on a Zoe, it's 105. So it's big chunk higher, like 70% higher torque setting. But yeah, so that's fun and games, getting that up there, wind up the torque wrench. But yeah, it's all good fun. So we are really getting there. It is literally home straight, and I want to get this back on the road and just give it a good test. It's the first time I've done this, and you never totally know. And if you have an issue, it just takes longer to take apart because you're not so familiar with the vehicles. But yeah, it's all good fun. I enjoy working on new stuff. I'm excited about the town style that's coming in. I've been doing some looking into that, so we will see on that. And I put this terrible little wire, this incredibly thin wire, back on. So yeah, that comes from, where are you? There you are. Comes from this wiring loom, and it's got to get to over there. So it was taped onto here, so I've retaped it on. Really, it wants a bit of protection, but you know, that's literally how it was. So I mean, these are obviously aftermarket. Yeah, okay, it's fused and it's decent stuff, but it's gonna wiggle as it rattles along. If they'd have made it a little bit longer, yeah, and it came round here, then yeah, they'd have been able to tape or sort of like fix it onto here and then fix it onto here, which would have been a lot neater. Or kind of do what they've done with this one, which is bring it this way. But I guess they've run it along the wiring loom that way. But yeah, you know, I just don't really like stuff that's not quite as good as it could be, really. So there we are. Right, I'm going to crack on, and last steps really. Yeah, I want to give this a good drive and just make sure it's all good. So I'll get this finished off and I'll catch you in a bit. Okay, so I've got this down. It's just on the ramps, and I've left it basically just in neutral but running with go on the dash, just so that the coolant pump's running and everything, just so it can bubble out the coolant. I bled it out, but it always like burps a little bit out. So yeah, I'm just going to get this out to give it a little drive and just make sure it's all good. So yeah, that was quite good fun, a little bit different to the Zoes, but yeah, really interesting to know kind of like that the bearings can still fail. 69 plate, you know, they came out 4 or 5 years before that, but still having the issues. But yeah, an interesting configuration, lots of design changes. But yeah, let's take this one for a drive and check it's all good. All right, cheers. Okay, so I've had a little test drive, and it's all good. Yeah, the rumble from the motor is gone, which is really good. There's still a little whine, so about between 45 to 50 miles an hour. A little whine. It's not uncommon with sort of this drivetrain, certainly on Zoes, to have a little bit of noise somewhere. The Zoes commonly get it about 60 miles an hour, and I know that's not the motor because I was chatting to a garage that did a Zoe motor replacement. They put a brand new motor from Renault onto the car, and that still had like a rumble or a whine at 60 miles an hour. So those sort of bits that come and go, I mean, obviously you've got all the suspension, you've got the wheel bearings, you've got all kinds of stuff on the vehicle. So having a rumble at certain speed, it's not a major concern. But the bit we were worried about, that continuous kind of low rumble from the motor, that is gone, which is really good. So yeah, the most surprising thing about this van is if you were going to pick a vehicle that you thought would not suffer from motor bearing issues, you would say this vehicle. I mean, I know it's a van, so maybe the usage, you know, could be a bit more heavy, but realistically, you're not going to put tons and tons in the back. The motor power is limited to, it's about 60 horsepower, 44 kilowatts. So, you know, even though it's the same basically motor as a Zoe, it is really a Zoe motor. It's got a different part number, but I can't see any difference, and I've looked at a lot of them. So it's the same motor. It's really power limited. And the charging is not done through the motor. So if that was a cause, that's ruled out. And the other thing is these are 33 kilowatt hours. So that's about 100 miles, give or take. So you're not doing a lot of miles. You're not charging through the motor. You know, it's just, and it's limited with the power as well. So everything's gentle on the motor. So it's really interesting. So I think that really does lean towards the fact of the cause of those bearing failures being the electrical discharge. It's sort of pitting the bearings. So yeah, but interesting. That was good fun doing that one. Hopefully that was interesting. If you've got a Kangoo and it's got motor bearing issues or it's making a rumbling noise, then let me know. Hopefully you found that interesting. Thank you for watching. If you're not subscribed, please consider doing so. And I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.